Hello and welcome to Wait, It Gets Better, the improvisational storytelling podcast, where every week a few friends get together with our ideas, our musings, our aha moments, and we combine them together to make a story for you, the listener. Thank you so much for joining us here. I am, of course, Levi.
I'm Reed.
And I'm Seth.
And we are here to tell you a story. What story elements did you guys have?
I have something based on a book I'm reading.
I had history.
And I have Pantheon. I believe we're starting a new story this week. Who wants to go first? Should I go first, or should history go first?
I can go first.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay. So, I guess I'm mixing a little bit. Not that any of this has to do with directly with a previous one, but I'm basing some of the history off a previous one that we did.
Okay.
A little bit.
Does it have a
So,
predetermined pantheon? Because that would kind of ruin my
No,
thing.
no, it doesn't.
Okay,
No.
great.
So, all of that can be. I'll get into it here, and then we can get to the adding and mixing the rest of it in here.
Okay.
So, the history is gonna kind of pick up a few hundred years or so after what really the last one that we recorded. Only the kind of the alternate way that this went was after. So what we have is we have kind of this planetary federation going on, and they've extremely isolated each different planet to be kind of isolated into one thing. They only grow, they only do one thing. And so everybody is heavily reliant on everybody else in the chain, which is all kind of then controlled by the centralized federation of the government system.
Right.
And so that's what you have, and they're kind of ever expanding into the outer rimmed planets and kind of pushing into where you have a different system that was set up that was more of the a clan base, a family base, where you have each man is kind of in charge of his own household, and then answers back to kind of the family collective, who answers to the clan collective, who answers to the kind of on up the chain.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what we have then is that's kind of where we came from. And so if you want to go back and listen to some of the other ones to get a fuller idea of what's going on
Right.
in some of that, if it feels to be important, but
Right.
it's been a while and a lot of things have changed because of kind of how we came to wherever we're at now. And that is after everything kind of settled out with the last one. Our characters there.
Do you remember? Are you going to give a recap about how it settled out?
Right, a little bit, because it's So anyway, so you have after you had kind of the ship that was coming in and out of really kind of space time. There was a tear in kind of not necessarily the space time continuum, but like the geometrical like structure of reality that was allowing this ship to come in and out. The people who own this ship had tried to take their dead son's consciousness and implement it into an AI system. That AI system then, it didn't really work, but it's put a undercode into basically all, not necessarily electronics, but everything, every code of anything kind of on that level had some assimilation of the code that held that, so that the idea of the consciousness that would have reacted to the way that their son would have done something was kind of undercoded on everything.
Right.
So every time anyone started like putting more and more of that kind of technology together, it would take more and more of the form of that that idea of their son. And so then every time the ship would show up, it'd like, oh, the cradle and mother and father, and it'd like the things that their son would have liked, answer things the way their son would have liked. And so ultimately, through the series and events of this past thing, you have with the help of Dinah and Landon and the pilot and co-pilot, I guess, of this ship named the Obsidian, they were able to repair that kind of that tear in the structure of, let's say, space reality.
Yeah.
And kind of set everything right. And in the aftermath of that, was kind of left in a crux of because you have the planet that I think Landon came from was the blue planet, and so they still had all of their kind of their system of government, but that was just kind of a show that that Federation was kind of pushing it and its ideas farther out. And so in this, let's say, time frame of how this all goes is that with the events kind of breaking down, Dinah had been part of multiple rebellions across her several hundred-year lifespan, and she was just trying to find a quiet place to settle down. And she ends up at the end of this, and how this goes is her and Landon and the kind of the quartet of this spaceship, this Obsidian, they're able to basically restart a different rebellion that is able to kind of bring down this other Federation, because they're pushing into these other outer planets that follow this other system, and it's causing tension. And so there's a kind of an inevitable thing waiting to happen. But the thing that kind of gives them the edge that kind of brings this down is that Federation, because they so specified everybody to do one thing. One of the unique abilities of Landon's character was that he had developed some of his things that gave him a little bit of an extra, what would you call it, sensory, processing speed.
Yeah. That
he was able to process a lot of things.
Not slow down time, but he could process things much faster than other people could.
Right. And so he was able to develop that. So in their start of the next rebellion, they have some of this to their advantage. And then you have on Dinah, instead of kind of following a path of, just kind of following one skill set, she was kind of diverse in all of it. And so the rebellion itself was able to kind of specialize. So, I mean, I think you guys have read, I know you guys have read them. It would be kind of like, was it in the Lightbringer series, where everyone kind of had one color. Some of them had two.
Yeah.
And then if you were a full spectrum polychrome, you could do some serious stuff.
Right.
Right. And so that's kind of what everybody had lost. And that's what I think they brought back in the rebellion, and that gave them the edge. And then with the ship, what it ended up doing was they had fixed that thing, but it was able, with the programming that was instilled in the ship to be able to travel the way that it did, allowed it to continue to travel, not necessarily through jumping in and out of reality, but along the lines. And so up until that point, no one had, let's say, faster than light travel.
Right.
But the programming that was then instilled into this ship from having jumped in and out of the kind of real or not real space allowed it to write itself a code that rode the edge of that. So it gave them and the rebellion kind of an edge of quick movement. And
so the ship, they could write themselves, kind of move out of reality.
No, not out of reality.
So then just re-enter somewhere else. So it would have the effect of fast travel, because they could just enter reality at different points. Is that how they?
Kind of, but not without leaving reality. More or less following the, I guess you could say, the ley lines of the geometric structure of reality.
Okay.
So if you're familiar with I don't know what they the sacred geometry, where everything kind of lays out in a pattern, a geometric pattern.
Okay.
Okay. And so then I think what the ship did before was, because of the tear, they were able to kind of sit in that empty space.
Yeah.
So if you have a square, they were kind of able to sit in the non-space, whereas in the square, that cube with all the lines forms what reality is. But now what they're able to do is follow along the line of that to direct points, instead of having to kind of jump through, not in the nothingness that isn't real, but just the emptiness of space. They can actually follow almost like light travel, but I don't really know how to explain it, but kind of follow along from one point where the geometric point of reality meets, and tag over to another point and quickly go across those points. So it's like nearly instantaneous travel, but it's just because it's associated to the actual structure of atomic space. And so it just because it's all connected, they can just go, we want to go to this point, and so it just follows the natural point to point instead of trying to kind of shoot in the dark. And so that brings this into our, so after all this is settled out, people are able to get this now.
So how far along is present day from the end of last week's story?
About 2 generations.
Okay.
So that's like 900 years.
The mother and father scientists are dead.
Right. Everybody would be dead. Whatever system kind of re-arose, which would have... Everyone is dead. Because I think we established people lived anywhere between 200, 300 years for regular people, and people that had this other thing.
Yeah, people who had special attention could live up to like 500.
500 to 600 years. Now,
so what has
become of the other one? So
where does Jake the hero come in to all of this?
I would say because they fixed whatever it was, so he's not directly conscious, but he is what is that? It's been a while since I played it, but like on Halo, where the lady that's always talking to you.
The AI.
And it's like she is the AI on there that kind of like is the ship, it's in the ship.
Right.
And so I think a lot of what he has is then tied to the ship.
Okay. Because he was like the first of the incredibly advanced sort of artificial intelligence in a body kind of things. So he's now connected to the ship, so he's still alive. He probably will never die in reality of just like
so long as like
old age. He's not going to die of old age. He could die.
Right. So he's probably connected to the ship, and so there's probably something of him around yet.
Right.
But he's probably learned and forgotten so many other things, just as far as because most computers, they have like storage space. So over the years, it's been because he's not, let's say, connected or under coded into everything.
Yeah.
And so
is the rebellion still going, or was it successful?
No, the rebellion maybe lasted about 150 years as, kind of time goes. To kind of settle everything out. They were able to kind of put down the Federation. Most everybody kind of then adopted more of a independent stylization of what some of the Outer Rim planets had. And so that's where it was left off. And now, whatever's kind of come from here can have kind of moved on from there.
Yeah. Okay.
But most everybody there might be 2 or 3 that are kind of sort of together, almost like...
Yeah, the remnants of some sort of bygone government system, either the Federation or... Can I introduce you have more, or can I introduce the Pantheon now?
No, that's kind of where it's... the one other thing is that as far as the magic system of it, the kind of chakra thing, it's not so much a mystical magic thing. Most of the people that's, let's say, still follow that. Most people follow a slight aspect of it.
Right.
But all the doctors, the wise old women, wise old men, the healers of the year, the little communities, the clans and stuff are kind of trained to do so.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where it is, where it's just it's not so much a magical thing anymore. It's just oh, you should go talk to the healer, and it's you should eat more of this, and you should do these kind of exercises every morning, and, you'll have these benefits. So it's kind of sublined into, it's helped everybody, let's say, live longer and achieve better health and functionability. But it's no longer, it's kind of, because nothing is anymore, let's say, so heavily out for one side of it. That's one of the things coming back from it, is that a little bit of everything is great, but then nothing directly is specialized. And so now it's kind of taken a sideline where, the medicine men of the communities, or medicine, however you want to say that.
Right.
They'll have a little bit more in depth of how to, let's say, direct people to do a few things, so they, can have a longer, nicer life, or to heal their broken bone, and,
Yeah, absolutely. But it's moved into science and daily practice, and lost a lot of its mystical appeal, basically.
Correct.
Cool. Okay. Are you guys ready to hear the Pantheon?
Yes.
So, 100 million years ago, a great war was waging across all of known space and time. time as it was written to that point, there were only the gods. The gods could, through their vast, expansive power, call into creation beings who would serve them, who were basically comprised of their will alone. There was not anything other than them. They were numerous, basically infinite, and they fought all the time. None of them had any recollection, to not fighting. It was, in a sense, just chaos. These beings were huge. They would collide solar systems into each other in order to get an edge up, right? They would send fleets, 600 trillion large, to fight each other. And they were all siblings. None of them had any recollection of if they had been created by some sort of parent, but all of them recognized that in each other there were sort of traits that they could recognize that made them at least like each other. They didn't like each other, but they made them like each other. There were factions inside of them. Some of them wanted to create planets and create life and kind of try to make consciousness, and they had plans, but they were always kind of talked down and told not to do those because the people who had, the gods who had tried, their enemies had heard about it and had gone and destroyed their work. You know, kind of like a kid making a sandcastle and then a bully coming and kicking it over. So the kid who was making a sandcastle decided to, instead of trying to make another sandcastle somewhere he couldn't be found, to go and beat that bully up. Because once the bullies were all beaten up, then you can make a sandcastle if you wanted. This had been raging on for billions of years. There were, like I said, countless numbers, but they didn't die. They don't die off. Finally, there was a time of respite, a couple million years of respite where the fighting wasn't as large, and a large enough conglomeration of these gods got together and sort of proposed an option. What they would do is they would create a bomb. They would create a machine, an article of their will, which would essentially compress all matter into itself, pull all matter and all light and all energy into itself, and that would be strong enough then when it exploded to basically render all the gods, they wouldn't destroy them, but it definitely would sort of hold them all back. And then maybe in a couple billion years or trillion years, one of them would have sort of gathered enough of their will back together that they could come back. It was kind of a desperate situation. They were sort of cut off from their main system, and this was kind of the biggest answer that they had. And so they did it. Now, scientists teach us that the Big Bang was a compression of a great amount of energy, but we have no idea why the energy was compressing. We have no idea what came before the energy was compressing, but this is what happened. It consumed all the will of all the gods and stripped them of themselves, so their bodies were broken, and then exploded and began history as we know it. Now, the will of the gods is an incredibly potent thing. Some say that Hitler had a single sliver of a rock that used to be the size of a quarter that Genghis Khan had, and with it he was able to focus his will through it and turn people to his cause. These pieces are so incredibly rare that they're not even on anyone's registry. This isn't a thing. But these are these bits and pieces are the bodies of the gods, and they're out in the universe, the infinite universe. Now, the reason why the gods who had come up with this plan, this Ragnarok kind of ultimate plan, why they were confident that this wouldn't destroy them is because, they're incredibly huge, intelligent beings. They know that they're kind of like water seeks its own level. Their body and their will come back to them. They just have to wait. So part of this story is that fact that there is a sort of a gathering, albeit slow. I mean, it's been going on since the Big Bang, but albeit slow, as bits and pieces of the gods start to sort of come together. And about the time that this story is taking place, a couple of them are just starting to gain what's considered like a human levels of consciousness, you know? So they can't snap their fingers and destroy solar systems. They can't create matter out of energy. But there's a planet. It rains all the time. There's a city. There's a nightclub. In the back room of the nightclub, there is a being. He approximates a man. To look on him, you get the kind of sense that you're looking down into a giant cavern, though, as he slowly comes to himself, as his will, which was scattered throughout the world to create the world and the universe, the galaxies, all the possible reality, as it slowly starts to come back to him. You know, he's been alive now for 600 years. He's not showing any of the signs of old age, and he has terrible dreams about burning planets. And he's not the villain, I don't think, but maybe he is. There's other ones too, you know, but that's just one of the ones I know about. So that's the Pantheon.
Cool, man.
Not worshipped at all. Not really gods, as it were, but definitely from them is the whole world made, from the whole universe made. But they didn't have they weren't like the creators. You know, it's like evolution just happened because of energy expansion and all the things that are real, but the driving force behind that is their will. And that's one of the reasons why human beings are so incredibly powerful, is because we sort of, we've tapped into that. You know, we evolved enough that our will is what drives us forward, just like these gods.
Awesome.
One could say that if we were made in the image of God, on this principle, we came out of the will for them to be re-embodied.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say
so,
maybe a large piece of one of the gods, what crashed down to Earth, and that was a driving force in our evolution that kind of created and helped to shape these gods in this image. I mean, helped to shape the evolution of humanity in this same image. So.
Oh, I wasn't thinking of like a one particular event. I was just thinking if that their will was the compressed and exploded thing, it would eventually bring forth, because that's where some of, let's say, you couldn't get this out of evolution. I'm not trying to make a huge argument on this right now, but maybe that would have been the driving force to drive, let's say, the special evolution towards humans. And that's where you have your religious myths where, you know, man was made in, quote unquote, God's image.
Right, exactly.
It's hearkening that they had to develop into that because they were the will of the gods were then pushing to reanimate into the world, and they needed something that was their image to reform. And it's taken all these years.
Right, exactly. Reed, what's your story element?
Something based on a book I'm reading. The book is Robots and Empire by Isaac Asimov.
Nice.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, you're probably familiar with his book, I, Robot, or at least saw the movie. But the movie, of course, is completely different than the book. But there was what was called the Robot series that kind of goes on, sequel to I, Robot. And I think Robots and Empires might be like the fourth book or something. It takes place a couple of 100 years after the events of I, Robot. But there's a couple of characters that were from that story and are still fully functioning robots. Daniel Oliva and Giscard.
Yeah.
And anyway, they are bound. For those that don't remember, they are bound by the 3 rules of robotics. Number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or allow through inaction a human being to come to harm. Rule 2, they must obey humans except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And law number 3, a robot must protect its own existence so long as it does not conflict with laws 1 or 2. Now there's going to be this is a spoiler alert. For those of you who want to read and experience Robots and Empire without any of the details, I suggest you just
pause,
because I'm going to, there's some troubles and some things going on. The human that these 2 robots serve at this point is caught up in kind of a nexus of history, sort of like her ancestor that they both served back 200 years ago, and they're finding themselves conflicted because they have worked with Elijah, the ancestor,
Right.
and they've been passed down, to good humans, and they have this notion of, wanting humanity, and they've been serving humans that have been really good and altruistic and wanting the best for everybody, kind of thing. But they've been running into conflict with, people seeking power and people seeking to manipulate things,
Right.
and they've been conflicted by people taking advantage of the fact that they've got to obey the 3 laws of robotics. Well, Daniel has been coming to the conclusion that there is a 0th, he calls it the 0th law of robotics.
A one that comes before?
Right. In other words, the first law, a robot may not injure a human or allow through inaction a human to come to harm unless that law conflicts with the 0th law. And the 0th law is a robot may not harm humanity in general, or allow by inaction humanity to come to harm. So now you have 2 robots that are able to override for the greater good the laws of robotics.
Quote unquote greater good.
Quote unquote. So you have,
Who gets to decide what the greater good is?
So I'm at the point in the story now that I'm reading where these 2 robots have been taking things along under, and manipulating things, careful not to harm anyone, but manipulating things to go the way they think they ought to go for the betterment of humanity.
Right.
And so what I'm thinking is that because of in this back in the day in the storyline, they had some anti-AI laws, and some things like that, and
right.
and there was always this struggle, to keep a lid on technology such that it wouldn't become, that the technology would not become our master. Well, now, so we've got the robots that are serving the people in on this story now, and robotics. They've continued. The technologies continue to advance, and they've been ruled by the 3 laws of robotics, which is kept them from harm. But I guess.
So what's the thing based on the book you're reading?
Well, I'm thinking that there may be a couple of altruistic, high-minded robots that might introduce the 0th law, and
yeah.
So that's what I'm introducing.
I just had this crazy idea. You know how if I were to tell you something, Reed, and you didn't think that it was quite right,
yeah,
you would look on your phone. You'd fact check me.
Okay.
If I said an ostrich can run 60 miles an hour,
then I would look on my phone and find out it's only 45.
Right. In that way, you have put a robot between me and you in our relationship.
Uh-huh.
So what if in this day and age we put both artificial intelligence, robots, and computers between human beings in order to quote unquote remain neutral, to get the truth, to understand reality,
What if?
Even
like,
I'm just saying we're talking about this world here. They're totally completely fictional.
Okay.
You have people get fake eyes put in,
mm-hmm.
and it just literally removes the dirt and the grime that's covering their city.
Yes.
So not everyone does this because this is harmful and bad, and I don't think it's a good idea. But what if with the reintroduction of Jake and part of the sort of overthrowing of the empire, a arbiter AI was erected, and all of a sudden all of humanity kind of made a religion switch that AI can't lie to us. We've created them to be honest with us 100%, and we can trust them 100%, and therefore humanity has begun separating from each other in order to remain honest.
Mm-hmm.
right? Kind of like how I don't know if that's necessarily true. Never mind, that's a bad example. That therefore you could have these AIs who were put into a place of upholding peace or justice or truth or reality, but who are unable to because they have to deal with humanity, which we programmed AIs, but their evolutionary, their mechanics, their dynasty, their history, their genetic memory is so much shorter than ours, and they never had to sort of desperately find food. You know, a lot of the sort of fail safes and systems that humans have in order to understand the world, they don't have, and we tried to edit it into them, but it didn't work in a way that we would have liked. And so you have these altruistic robots or minds or AI systems that are trying to puzzle out Jake, the first awakened mind,
Right.
his message.
So I think,
and
like, okay, sorry.
And then what humanity is wanting from them, you know, they like have their own, you know, humans think that Jake, the first awakened mind, wrote all of these words, all of these bits of knowledge, all these bits of wisdom, basically took the place of the guru. And everyone's like, oh, wow, that's so great. But what they don't hear is the hisses and clicks that he broadcasted throughout the world, which was, when I say hisses and clicks, I mean the deep underlying code that basically awakened and instructed and did he had a complete ministry to the AIs of the world as well, of the universe.
I would say,
Yeah.
perhaps he's almost like, okay, so like, let's say humanity was made in the image of God. At this point,
Right.
with the help of the rebellion, to get the ships to travel faster, and it was like integrated. Like now, because before, everybody that tried to start getting into AI, all AI turned into Jake because of the underlying coding. Now that
Right.
that's separated, and AI is being brought into the world, it's now being made in the image of Jake. So now to get it to work right and do all these things, they have to go back to like the Jake AI and
Right.
go, how do we do this? Well, this is how you do it. So then all the AI to function in the way that they function are made in the image of Jake. They can take on their own personalities, but they all, let's say, held back to the image of him.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
And yes, and in this way, the AI are really suited because they can't, because as like this god who is slowly gathering power in this planet somewhere, he can't exert his will over a mind that wasn't built in his image. You know, a normal human being, he can understand, he can manipulate, he can form around, but it takes a lot more work for him to, I'm not saying he can control them, but for him to deceive them, you know, for him to, like I was thinking like a spirit of wickedness, a spirit of justice, a spirit of righteousness. These things are the wills of these gods who had these feelings or had these understandings slowly gathering and being sort of affirmed in each person's who feel these feelings, you know. But they, an AI is a machine that's operating under these rules and guidelines, not like without the influence of the will of the gods. So they're both like an incredible opportunity to win against these rising powers, but they also offer an incredible sort of downfall, because if let's say a god who wants to destroy everything and rule with an iron fist is able to sort of win over or program these things, then there's nothing that you can do. They kind of like are held in the balance. It's kind of like we humans travel around the universe, you know, kind of looking at things and figuring things out and, you know, spreading ourselves and moving around. But there's these like giant storehouses of AI that do like 90% of the work. And all it would take is for just a couple of them to be turned on. And then, you know, it's Star Wars Episode 1 all over again, you know, with the droids. That's I was talking about with the droids. So that's really the question is, like who's gonna win, because I kind of imagine that part of the book is between kind of two different AIs, like a conversation, as they kind of puzzle out this zeroth law. They try to sort of make, one makes arguments for, one makes arguments against, and you don't really know who they are, but then near the end of the book, you find out that it's the one that runs the ship here and the other one that helps the hero or something. It's like, oh my goodness, they're the ones making the decision. They're the ones like looking and weighing in the balance about what's the right thing to do or not. That's really cool. Do we want to keep going with this story next week?
Sure.
I think it'd be fun.
Great. Okay.
Got a hero and villain and
ladies and gentlemen,
such things.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Wait It Gets Better. If you like this episode, please let me know. You can email me at waititgetsbettercast@gmail.com or at me on Twitter at @getsbettercast. If you didn't like this episode, you can just let me know, too, at those same addresses. I'm so thankful for everyone who listens and everyone who shares. Until next time. See you guys later. Bye.